Alright mga kameta, kamusta kayo dyan? Ayan, we're back in the seat. Pag-usapan natin itong mga boom! Mga pangyayari dito. Pagdating sa Philippines, China, US, and then of course may dynamics ng tatay, and then may dynamics ng sibling rivalry, may dynamics ng tatay School of Diplomacy, geopolitics, maraming pag-usapan mga kameta. Pasensya na kung naka-formal tayo kasi right away after this, sunod na interview na naman tayo. Kahapon nga, pauwi na nga tayo. Kahit sa airport, back to back yung interview. So, kung makita niyo yung footage ng Al Jazeera interview natin and Deutsche Welle, among others, nandun na tayo sa airport sa Kuala Lumpur, which by the way is among my favorite airports on earth. Dahil yun nga, nagawa ng Malaysia nung hindi pa sila ganong kayaman na bansa nung 1980s, 90s pa, di ba? So anyway, getting back to this mga kameta, medyo may bardagulan na nangyari ngayon dahil very strong ang emotions ng tao dito sa issue ng EDCA at medyo umiinit ang usapin EDCA and whether Marcos Jr. is getting the EDCA question right. Is Marcos Jr. preparing us for a potential war? Is Marcos Jr. provoking potentially a new war? Or Marcos Jr. is correctly helping to deter and prevent a World War III or at least a war over Taiwan and the West Philippine Sea? What is going on here? At dito mga kameta, nakikita natin maraming mga back and forth na nangyari. So since yesterday, I've been very active on Twitter. You can see I had a lot of back and forth with folks. Interestingly, parang both Tatay Digong supporters and yung mga progressive leftist groups, their line is very similar in terms of EDCA is gonna make us a tuta of US. Essentially, that line of argumentation. So I had to kind of come back and question that. Interestingly, dun sa mga some of our discussions on EDCA, nakita natin na some of our friends from Singapore, among other countries, had to correct some of these Tatay School of Diplomacy graduates. Yung mga nagsasabi na, umasa na lang tayo sa sarili natin kakayahan. Yung mga ganyan. Yung mga walang alam sa basics of operational capacity, sa basics of deterrence, sa basics ng anong mga klaseng naval and air force capabilities na kailangan natin to have credible minimum defense posture. Yan, na school tuloy sila. As I said, there's a reason why Singapore, a Chinese majority country with very robust economic relationship with China, has among the most advanced armed forces on earth. There's a reason why Singapore permanently hosts naval assets of United States. We can talk about that more later on. So, I am 100% mga kameta for a nationalist position. I 100% want us not to rely on anyone else but ourselves. But I'm also 100% realistic that hindi pwede dadaan lang ito sa slogans lang at parali-rali lang. No, we have to have a realistic way of dealing with the bullying situation in the West Philippine Sea. All our neighbors are dealing with that in one way or another, right? And practically all of our key neighbors, whether it's Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, Vietnam, all of these countries have better defensive capabilities than the Philippines because they had leaders who were probably less corrupt, more competent, more visionary. So for a very long time, they have been steadily building up their capability. I would say that Singapore and Vietnam may have already a minimum defense credible posture vis-a-vis China in case things go ugly. I think Indonesia and Malaysia are trying to get there. But as far as the Philippines is concerned, mga kameta, anyone with a functioning mind knows we're nowhere close to that. We still don't have a full-fledged modern fighter jet. The FA-50s we got, salamat kay Aquino for setting the process into motion 10 years ago. But those are just upgraded trainers, mga kameta. Our neighbors like Singapore already pushing for F-35 fifth-generation fighters, right? Mga kapitbahay natin katulad ng Malaysia and Indonesia have both advanced American fourth-generation fighters and also Russian or Russian derivative fighters, especially in the case of, for instance, Malaysia. And also in the case of Vietnam, they have some of the more advanced Russian fighter jets, not to mention also Kilo-class submarines. They have a more advanced version of Kilo-class submarines than China. Wala tayong ganyan mga kameta. Wala tayong any of those things. So, yes, of course, we want to be self-reliant. But, nasaan po tayo ngayon? Nasaan po tayo ngayon pagdating sa actual capacity natin? Kaya nga po mga kameta, ang tanong dito is, first, should we work with our allies? Obviously, yes. Hello. B, how can we make sure that working with our allies doesn't make us more dependent on our allies, including the United States? So that's where pwede tayo magkaroon ng sapat na diskusyon. And this is where I think we can have a healthy debate, no? Kung saan, ang tanong dito is Marcos going too far into the American camp in the same way that Tatay Digong was somehow going too far into the Chinese camp? I always say one of the biggest problems in Philippine foreign policy and strategic history is we go extremes. Either super lumalapit tayo sa US versus China or super lumalapit tayo sa China, katulad ni Tatay Digong, wala naman nangyari, wala tayong nakuha. Now, these are also the realities, mga kamera. So, first of all, we don't have our own minimum defense credible posture yet. We're working on that, but it may take 5 to 10 years. That's why people in AFP would say we need to work with our allies. We need to work with allies so that we can get the best defensive capabilities, best training. Kaya yung balikatan ngayon, for instance, there'll be usage of advanced weaponry systems, no? So that yung ating yung ating sandatahang lakas will be more familiar with modern 21st century warfare, including tactics that were used in Ukraine against Russia very, very effectively. So for instance, American Patriot missiles are going to be used in Balikatan. There are going to be drills and simulation of potential amphibious island defense warfare dyan malapit sa Scarborough, dyan sa may Zambales. So, but mga kameta, it's going to take time before we get the real fighter jets. We don't even have a single squadron of advanced fighter jets. We may get F-16 fighters V, hopefully, or something along those lines, or some sort of more downgraded version, I don't know, Gripen fighters from Sweden. Pero wala pang updates on that eh. So, we don't even have a single squadron of advanced fighter jets. So, how are you going to defend our country in that situation? Now, we're moving in the right direction, but we're catching up, guys. We're catching up, and we need to really step it up big time. Yung mga katulad ng South Korea and Japan, na napaka-advanced countries, militarily, industrially, technologically, sila may permanent US bases na nga sila eh. Now, I'm not saying we should have permanent US bases. No, I'm against that. I'm against any kind of reliance. But I'm also against magical thinking. I'm also against just sloganeering and pakyut na, kunyari pa nationalist. No, you have to be realistic because we have to defend our national interests. Yung ating mga mangingisda, they cannot wait for another 20, 30 years before we solve this problem. Ala Deng Xiaoping, this is a generous. No, every year, mga kameta, we're losing billions of dollars in fishery resources in West Philippine Sea. Every year, we're losing the chance of developing energy resources, oil and gas, particularly dyan sa Reed Bank, because binubuli tayo dyan. We have a clear and present everyday bullying problem in the West Philippine Sea. So ang tanong ngayon is, what are we gonna do about that? Sapat ba mag-rally tayo? Sapat ba na diplomacy lang? Well, Tatay Digong tried diplomacy. Didn't he try? He tried diplomacy all the way, right? Saan tayo? Anong nakuha natin concessions? Nasaan yung mga big-ticket infrastructure investments? Nasaan yung mga joint patrols, yung mga hindi haras daw yung ating mga mangingisda? Wala. Lalong lumala nga yung situation. Lalong lumala yung situation. Tignan mo yung Whitson Reef. Tignan mo yung Reed Bank. Hindi nangyari. Hindi yan nangyari sa ilalim ni Aquino once Aquino filed the arbitration award. Wala nang mga bullying na ganyan na nangyari. Katulad ng nangyari sa Reed Bank. Naniram lang yung ating mga mangingisda. Na muntik na. Nalunod lahat. Diba? Muntik na. So, diplomacy didn't work. Clearly, 6 years of super, more than diplomacy. Some would say subservience, no? And then ASEAN. Okay, ito na naman, narinig natin din sa mga kaibigan natin. Doon tayo sa ASEAN. Mga kameta, I'm all around ASEAN, okay? I love ASEAN. ASEAN is close to my heart. I was just in Malaysia. I'll go around the region. I have contacts all across the region. I'm talking to officials, to leaders, top-level officials, top executives. Ito po yung katotohanan. ASEAN is not with us in the West Philippine Sea, South China Sea. They cannot even finalize a legally binding code of conduct with China. More than 20 years na natin ni-negotiate yan. In fact, the first time we discussed legally binding code of conduct was in the late 1990s. Alright? Wala tayong maasahan sa ASEAN. Pwede tayo umasa doon sa bilateral or minilateral cooperation maybe with Vietnam, Malaysia, ganon. I'm for that. But wag tayong magmangmang, di ba? Wag tayong ilusyonado. Wala tayong makuha sa ASEAN. ASEAN made zero support for us when our arbitration award came out. Okay? Let me be absolutely clear. Zero support. Tatay Digong, 6 years engagement diplomacy with China, zero concessions in the West Philippine Sea. Lumala yung militarization, lumala yung bullying sa ating mga mangingisda. None of that is working. And then, wala rin tayo sariling kakayahan in terms of minimum deterrence capability yet. Our goal is to go there, to have that minimum deterrence capability. But to get there, the argument is maybe you want to work with your allies. But at the same time, as I always said, EDCA should not lead us into over-dependence on the United States. EDCA should be leveraged to make sure we build up our own defensive capabilities. EDCA should be leveraged to make sure that we get the best deal out of our alliances. And EDCA should not drag us into an unnecessary provocation over Taiwan, but be sufficiently helpful in preparing us and hopefully deterring the situation. See, it's very subtle. It's not an either-or situation. It's not a binary situation. Kaya nga hindi mo madadala yan sa ideology lang. At it's a complex world, alright? And when it comes to operational realities, dapat mag-isip ka na mabuti, hindi yung slogan-slogan lang. Hindi yung for America or anti-America, for China. Hindi gagana yung mga ganyan, alright? Hindi, I mean, it's good to rally and all of that, great. But what are the operational realities? And this is where, mga kameta, I'll tell you, honestly, I'm not 100% sure whether we're on the right track here. Alright? So, let me lay out the argument here. So, actually, kung nakita nyo, over the past week, mga kameta, I had at least 5 articles that came out on this EDCA issue, etc. Right? So, you can see I'm really almost obsessively writing. So, I had one piece on Nikkei Asia that came out the other day, talking about the logic of what Marcos was doing. Please feel free to read that. I had another one, which South China Morning Post naman, looking at a completely different angle, which was the resistance to the EDCA, Marcos, Tatay Digong, you know, yung mga leftist progressive groups. So ito yung isa pang article, sinulat naman natin dyan. So, and then mayroon tayong article kahapon naman sa Inquirer when I asked about it. So you can clearly see I'm paying a lot of attention to it. I'm not just doing vlogs, whatever. I'm really trying to get a 360 degrees analysis of this issue live. Kanina, actually, I was working on another article on the latest balikatan, etc. Kaso kulang na oras, ang dami mga interviews, etc. Habol pa tayo sa next interview natin, mga kameta. So, right and left, just over the past week, lahat yan mga pinapublish natin, sinusulat natin, all different angles of the issue. Obviously, you just have 700, 800 words in a single article, so I cannot put everything there. God willing, we'll have a book or something on it later on. But you get what I'm saying, mga kameta. So, I'm looking at this from every possible angle. So, let's talk about operational realities. So, okay, bilisan natin ng konti. Pasensya na mga kameta. So, ito. Okay. So, this is the bone of contention, right? So, the 4 additional bases na binigay sa Amerika, sa ilalim ng EDCA, 3 dyan ay sa Cagayan, Isabela. Although I have some slight issue dito sa map na yan kung very accurately nilagay. Yung isang map medyo mali-mali yata, napunta na sa Cordilleras yung ano. Now, okay, on one hand, you can argue that, wait lang, bakit napakalapit sa Taiwan? Bakit Cagayan and Isabela? Eh, hindi naman masyadong relevant ito sa West Philippine Sea. Well, I could say, at least on one area, on one side, it is relevant to the Benham Rise issue and Philippine Sea. Not West Philippine Sea, but Philippine Sea. Remember, meron din tayong concern sa Philippine Sea. Marami din tayong resources sa Philippine Sea. You know, di ba? At may concern tayo na may mga submarines from other countries passing there, naming, you know, subterranean features, blah, blah. So, there's that aspect. But at the same, of course, it's close to Taiwan. So, I do not completely agree with the president when he says, hindi, walang risk yan at all. Hindi yan, walang kinalaman sa Taiwan yan just in case hindi yan gagamitin offensively. I'm not very sure about that too. But, at the same time, mga kameta, I noticed 2 interesting things that Marcos Jr. did, or the administration in general. Of course, I'm not gonna ascribe everything to Marcos Jr. Obviously, he's working with a lot of people. One is, mga kameta, na-relocate po yung location ng balikatan exercises this year. Alright? So, balikatan exercises initially were supposed to be in Ilocos Norte. Alright? And then, pinalipat yan sa Zambales. So, clearly, from a more Taiwan-oriented exercises, it became a much more West Philippine Sea-oriented one. So, adjustments were made there. And in fairness, I would say, mga kameta, to a certain degree, bakit ako nakakonect dito sa... Wait lang. Sorry mga kameta. Ba't ako naka-VPN dito? Bigla na lang nag-connect yung VPN on itself, ha? Parang dodgy yan, ha? Wait lang. Ang problema ko, i-disconnect ko yan, mawawala ako ng sandali. Wait lang. Sige, let's just keep it there. I hope it's not too slow. Anyway, you get what I'm saying, mga kameta? It's a complicated situation. Hindi yan madadaan sa isang, it's not, there are no good options. It's about choosing what's the least bad options. You see, let's be realistic, all right? Wala tayong sariling kakayahan to deal with China at this point in time. Walang tulong galing sa ASEAN. Hindi gumana yung diplomacy ni Tatay Digong. Ang tanong ngayon is, may saysay bang EDCA? You can argue, yes, but at the same time, why are we giving these bases na super close to Taiwan? But I would say some of them are close also to Benham Horizon, Philippine Sea. So, it depends how we're going to use it. Nevertheless, mga kamen, as I said, in fairness to Marcos Jr., again, I'm not defending the guy per se. I'm just saying we have to look at the facts. So, Balikatan was actually, sorry, I'm just trying to bring out the data here. War games, relocated, Ilocos. You see, everything we talk about, mga kameta, it's based on evidence and fact and all. So here, yan. So this is the news. No more major Balikatan exercises in Ilocos Norte. That was the initial plan. So that means, Marcos siguro realized, also partly thanks to Amy Marcos, na baka masyadong provocative pag nandun. This is relevant for me. I think this is important. Had the war games of Balikatan, especially the island, amphibious attack, whatever, we're there in Ilocos Norte or super lapit sa Taiwan, like, that could have been a little bit tricky, right? So, ito yun, mga kameta. So, ito. So, this is one concession that Marcos Jr. kind of made, or at least that's my understanding. Kaya nga sabi ko, nag-hedge pa rin si Marcos, eh. And the other one, mga kameta, is hindi binigay, or so far, based on what we know, Americans are not gonna have access to Mavulis na or Fuga Island na napakalapit, mga kameta, super lapit sa Taiwan. So as north as some of these bases are, yung in Isabela and Cagayan, they're not north enough. Just to give you an idea how north is north, this is north, right? Like super close, only 100 nautical miles, no? Yung mga kameta natin dyan sa YouTube, don't worry, I'll upload this so that you can see the graphics and all. Sorry about that. So yon. So this is really north, mga kameta. Kung yun ang binigay sa ilalim ng EDCA, and then like, medyo, ano yan, too much na yan for, even, I'm gonna be a little bit worried. Now, maybe it will be open to Americans in an event of war, God forbid, right? But so far, hindi siya kasama sa EDCA. So my sense is, there is some sort of hedging that Marcos Jr. is doing. In short, hindi tayo 100% in with the Americans against China over at least Taiwan issue. But clearly, we kind of still, need to figure out whether Marcos Jr. will be smart enough to leverage the EDCA to get the best weaponry possible for the armed forces of the Philippines, right? So for instance, the Americans approved more than $2 billion for the Philippines, AFP deals, military deals, etc. But I saw no updates on this at all. So maybe one thing we have to make sure is, siguraduhin natin may saysay itong alliance na yan in terms of also upgrading our own capabilities on our own. So, again, just to be very clear, I'm personally very uncomfortable with depending on any country, right? Any country at all. And superpowers have their own interests. So, absolutely 100% for nationalism, self-reliance. From a tactical standpoint, what I'm saying is that, well, kung ang Pilipinas ay nagbigay ng lahat ng mga access na yan sa Amerika, may makuha ba siyang kapalit in terms of gaining access to advanced fighter jets, missile systems, Harpoon missiles, F-16V, etc.? Any update on that? All right? I don't see. Once we see an update on that, then we can have a more conversation over this, mga kameta. Do you get what I'm saying here? Do you get what I'm saying? Ganon dapat yung discussion natin. Hindi yung mga tuta ng Amerika, tuta ng China. Yung mga ganon. We have to be realistic, mga kameta, because this is how they talk about it in Singapore, in Malaysia, in Vietnam, even in Indonesia to a certain degree. We should talk about it more, even more so like that, because nandun tayo sa pinaka-frontline. Sa pinaka-frontline. At ang tanong dito is, ano rin makukuha natin, hindi lang sa Amerika, pero sa mga ibang aliado natin, katulad ng Australia, Japan. Because by the way, yung Balikatan, andyan din yung mga Australians, andyan din yung mga Hapon, right? Hindi lang itong mga Amerikano lang, di ba? So let's talk more about this, mga kameta. What I'm just telling you is that it's a complicated issue. So please lang, wag nating i-reduce lang ito sa mga simplistic nonsense out there. Alright? I also know there are a lot more to talk about. So for instance, everyone is making a lot of noise out of this Chinese renminbi, global hegemony, finance, dollar, Chinese. Again, beyond slogans and beyond headlines, we have to really break it down. Is renminbi, which is, by the way, not fully convertible, which is pegged to the US dollar, gonna really be a real challenge of the US dollar hegemony anytime soon? Pag-usapan natin yan, mga kameta. So yun ang ginagawa natin sa mga vlogs natin dito, mga kameta. We go for serious, complex, multi-level analysis because the world is complicated. So please don't fall for nonsense out there by people are trying to simplify this. No, it's not black and white. It's 50 shades of gray. The question is, how dark gray or light gray? So how can we make the most out of this? Because if wala tayong alliances and we're just on our own, kakainin tayo ng buhay. At kawawa yung mga manginista natin. Kawawa yung karagatan natin. Kawawa yung mga resources natin. Every year, mga kameta, we're losing billions of dollars potentially in fisher resources because we cannot defend our own sovereign territories and waters. We can't. So, logically, you'll say, rely on, work with allies. But working with allies also has its own risk of getting dragged into their interests and their, their own agenda, or getting too dependent on them. So you have to also mitigate that risk. So it's not an option not to have allies. I mean, di ba, Churchill put it best, the only thing worse than having bad allies is not having any allies, right? So, ganun lang. Realistic dapat tayo dito sa issue na yan. But realistic doesn't mean na we'll be subservient to one superpower because we want to defend against another superpower. At the same time, don't go for false equivalence. Hindi natin kalaban ng mga Kano sa West Philippine Sea. Let's be very clear about it. At hindi yung mga Kano ay nagtathreaten ng invasion ng Taiwan. So you get what I'm saying? That's the problem I'm saying right now. A lot of people are approaching this from ideological standpoint. They're caged by ideology. You say ideology is good in the sense that it gives you some framework understanding, but it also tends to blind you to complexities of reality. And you're not gonna learn about reality if your mind is not willing to see all the 50 shades of complexity in actual 21st century geopolitics. We're not talking about 1960s. We're not talking about 1980s. We're not talking about the 20th century Cold War. We're talking about 2023, new Cold War between US and China. And speaking of new Cold War, mga kameta, so I'm looking, God willing, I'm looking forward to starting my own Substack. So I'm thinking it will be a new Cold War Substack. So God willing, please subscribe to my upcoming Substack. God willing, that's what we're gonna move towards. So I want to do more Substack so that we have constant analysis, hindi lang dun sa mainstream media, but my own ideas. So please subscribe. I will post my Substack when it's done. And as I said, we're also hoping to go towards in-studio interviews and discussions. So for that, kaya nga sabi ko nga, please, kung, ayan na, may QR code na tayo. Ayan, yung mga QR code natin, please. So if you want to make any contributions, please send it straight here. Don't send checks or cash or something to me. Please don't do that, all right? Because we don't know kung saan mapunta yan. Kung may gusto kayong contribution, kahit maliit lang, okay lang yan. Any humble amount, I really appreciate that, all right? So we can do more in studio, we can do more proper analysis, etc. All right? Maraming salamat, mga kameta. Sorry, I have to go to my next appointment, kaya nga naka-ready na tayong ganyan. Hindi na ako naka-sporty and all, meta mode, because we have to go there. Oh, by the way, also, shout out kay Tita Nenet Aguirre. I'll shout out again next time more. Tita, magka-age, hindi naman magka-age, mas bata ako. Pero, hindi ako ganun kabata. Batchmates kami na anak mo. Alright. Thank you, Tita. Thank you for your support. Alright. So, shout out dyan sa mga lahat ng supporters natin. Yan. Again, if you want to support us, kahit humble amount, so far, I think we got a few hundred pesos of contributions. I appreciate that. So, then again, pakisend straight dun sa QR code. Don't send me checks or mamaya kung saan mapatpad yan. And obviously, I cannot give my phone number and my details and all. It's for my privacy. So, please just send it straight to that QR code for GCash if you can. If you don't know how to operate it, please learn. It's not that complicated. Alright? Tinuruan ko yung nanay ko how to operate GCash and all. Alright? Any amount, I appreciate it. It's just to get the basics done para when we can rent studios, etc. Just for that. Alright, mga kameta? There's so much we can do. I see questions on YouTube about Macron. I call Macron the father of Karen diplomacy. Nagkakalat na naman siya. Last year, nagkalat siya on Russia, friendly sa Putin, nag-feeling siya na he can prevent the war on his own. Ayan, nagkalat siya doon. Ngayon na naman, nagkakalat na naman siya over Taiwan and China. I don't know about that guy. Pa-relevant siya. And Macron is the most unpopular leader in Europe. Everywhere I go in Europe, when they mention Macron, people go like that. All right? They were angry at him when it was in the Baltic area. They laugh at him when I was in France. They laugh at him when I was in Germany even more. They laugh at him in UK. They laugh at him in, you know, I'm saying, everywhere I've been in Europe in the past year or so, different places, pag Macron, daming galit sa kanya. I think he has the right vision for Europe to be more self-reliant, but his execution, his, some would say, narcissism, man, doesn't have. You see, ako, you know me, I mean, fuego, all right, okay, mag-post ka, you know, okay, I'm fine with that, but come on, don't overdo it, all right? And France is not a superpower. Let's get those things right. And France is not Europe. The Germans don't agree with him. The Spanish are not necessarily with him. The Baltic states completely disagree with him, based on what I understand, on many issues. Poland is not fond of him. Scandinavian countries are not with him, and UK is not part of EU anymore. So, yeah. Anyways, we can talk more about Macron, about BRICS, so many things. But for now, let me just keep it here. All I'm saying is this. Huwag tayong magpabudol sa mga simplistic solutions and analysis at mga expert dyan. Alright? Thank you very much again. As I said, please, if you have any contributions to make, don't send me checks, don't send me something like that. Because I'm not gonna give my private details and all. Mamaya kung saan mapatpat yung mga contributions na, I cannot vouch for that. Alright? So please, if you have anything, straight dun sa GCash QR code na pinost natin, any amount, I appreciate it. Sabi ko nga, with 500,000 followers we have in different platforms. Even if piso each of them, God willing, will have enough, no? Hopefully to do something about renting studios, etc. Wala tayong I mean, I don't have my own studio, I cannot afford it, etc. We can only rent that, all right, at best. God willing, kung medyo may kakayahan tayo, mag-home studio version ako. But this is the best I can offer right now. Low budget version, all right? Low budget but high information, high context, high level, all right? Maraming salamat mga kameta. Super appreciate all your support. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Na-miss na naman sana ako, di ba? Medyo matagal tayo hindi nag-usap na mabuti. Tapos nakita ko yung mga live ko from Malaysia, puro mga pixelated kasi hindi maganda yung internet. Walang yan. Laki ng bayad ko dito sa, hindi ko na sabihin yung pangalan. Laki ng bayad ko sa roaming, ha? Tapos ganyan lang internet makuha ko. Awanin. Gawit tayo. Sige mga kameta, thank you so much. Sorry, I got a little bit emotional because ayoko ng nonsense. I have no patience for nonsensical talk, all right? If we want to level up as a country, we have to level up our level of discussion, all right? Kahit maraming galit sa akin, maraming nagre-respond sa akin, someone has to do it. There are a lot of people smart there, they're not talking They're not speaking out And they don't have the platform. So we have, God willing, thank God, we have the platform. So we want to make the best use of that. All right? So yeah, you give nonsense, I'll call it out. No problem about it. I'm not perfect too, but so far, we kind of predicted a lot of things that are happening on geopolitics. So maybe we kind of understand things, but obviously, I'm just a human being. All right? Let's have serious discussion, not partisan, not ideological, not blah, blah, blah. All right? This is not 1960s. This is not Soviet Union versus US versus Malaysia. No, this is 2023. Alright? So sana yung mga kaibigan natin dyan, mag-upgrade na kayo. Medyo mag-update na kayo. Alright? Let's level up. Level up na tayo. Alright? Level up na tayo. Yun lang naman Level up na tayo. At wag tamad. I published 5 articles at least on EDCA over the past 5 days or 1 week, whatever. Read at least one of them. Don't just read my tweet or just don't try to just take some of my statements out of context. Read what I'm saying there. It's very multi-level, 360 degrees. That's what I always do. That's what you should do. That's what everyone should do. If you're a true patriot, you don't fall just for nonsensical slogans. You do your assignment. You do your analysis. All right, mga kameta? Thank you very much. God bless. Talk to you soon. Salamat. Thank you so much sa lahat ng mga sumusuporta sa atin dito sa YouTube, dito sa Facebook, and obviously, please yung GCash, alright, kahit maliit lang, appreciate natin. So far, may mga 200 pesos yata pumasok, so we appreciate that. Thank you. God bless. Talk to you soon.